Hey, how y'all doing today? Let's do it to it. We'll do board editing. Okay. We'll get this here, and then we will start. We'll start our process of learning. Let me make sure I have this right. Okay. It's white to move. We're going to figure out what it's Kuryakin as white and Gelfed as black. This is the World Cup 2009. So this is not a anything that's small. This is basically huge. Okay. Oh, I put a C. There we go. This KRJKIN. Okay, perfect. GELFAND. Got it. And that perfect. Okay, dokie. We're looking at it. Oops, I have to make the board bigger. There we go. Perfect in there. Alright. Alright, let's take a look to see what we got here. Black has just traded off his Queen Knight on D4. Black had just traded off his Queen Knight on D4. So basically knight traded, and so that's where that belongs. And so white, which is Kuryakin, he plays this move here. It's not an exclam move, it's just a move. But we're going to talk about if he plays knight D2. There's rook A6 by Gelfed, and it's a really strong move because this is getting the rook in play. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is get your rooks in. You can get your bishops and knight, but to develop a rook, oh yeah. Knight F3 to go after the weakness of this pawn. G6, and that pins the pawn on G2. So let me get a drink here. Oh, perfect. Okay, dokie. White crossed him up with basically this is what he said. With rook E1. Black could see that it threatened bishop takes D, queen takes, and then rook takes d7. So the idea is here, here, and then come bow. Boom, you pick up a piece. So that's why Gelfand played rook a6 here. So if he'd played something more like maybe bishop f6, maybe bishop takes, queen takes, and then knight tries to get in via here and aim at the pawn. There's always that type of play. If black has to defend against the threat via e6, which is, this is also an line. There's that r. There's bishop e6 that could be played here. He shelters his kingside plan, or shatters his kingside plan with rook over, this type of stuff. This move here would ruin the plan. So he basically, Gelfand just went with the plan. His plan, as long as it didn't ruin the game, which it doesn't, he's going to go all out. And he'd have to abandon his idea. Nevertheless, black really liked the rook lift. Having seen this move, I understand that it had to be played, he wrote, and that meant he looked at a lot of the lines. After bishop takes, rook a6, bishop takes, d5, queen takes, d5, rook takes, d5, and then basically rook g6. To him, it was a calculated situation. So it's white to move here. The threat is really interesting. Black threatens mate on g. He saw that g3 here, if he played g3, that the bishop would take on h3 and would give him a really good chance of play. And if g4, then f5. So basically Gelfand saw this move here. Then he saw f5, and the whole idea is he's giving up a piece so that he can come crushing through with his move. So in the end, white declined the sacrifice. Thanks to this refute to abandon, black got the edge after white played this move here. After this queen h5, he got the edge. This is actually what was played. B4, and eventually Gelfand went on to win. There's also b4 exclam. Even better of a move would be b4. Bishop d2, knight f4, exclam. and then queen queen f3 and rook f6. With the idea of a stellar discovery. Excuse me. Oh, not good there. Okay, it's called My Turn. The psychology. Basically, yeah, the psychologists have found through experiments after experiment that people have stronger feelings about losing than about winning. Economists who also analyze this phenomena give its name uh, loss adverse. And experienced chess players know it has the curious feeling that the joy of winning a game never quite makes up for the pain of losing one. This helps explain why many amateurs fight desperately and skillfully in a bad position, but when they relax, they realize the danger of losing is past. An amateur who survives a strong attack as black may say, "Good, now I can go forward to play white next in my next game." A master in the same situation will say, "Good, now it's my turn to play for a win in this game." So basically, one second, let me get a drink. One is, I survived. The other one is, good, it's my turn to play now. And I think that's really interesting. The kind of psychology of the chess, the feeling of losing. And the chapter we're in is chapter 4 more. And the session that we just read was My Turn. Yeah, there's some movies that, rather than quit, they'll actually pick up even the sled and whatever, and they'll cross the finish line. That's kind of what they're talking about, and that's kind of the what they're talking about. That's that grandmaster that they don't look at a draw the same way that an amateur does. They look at it as if it's their turn as white, they're more than happy to participate in getting to the next game, and it's not a stressful thing for them. They look forward to playing as white next time instead of black. Okay. Let's do it to it. Gotta make sure I have everything right. Another endgame, which is, I'm glad Andrew Solstice is doing that. Adams. sure I spell out the person's name right. Uh-huh. Yep. Oops, I gotta flip the board. Okay. White had missed 2 winning lines in the time scramble, as well as a third one that would have brought black to a, a virtual defeat. Now that the time control was reached, black could catch a breath. She saw the worst was over because of this is because rook to b1. Queen could go to, I mean, bishop, rook can go to b1, right? Or rook a1, or rook c1, followed by queen d1. Should draw. Then her threat of mate on g1 or h1, if white's queens leave the board, would force white to draw by perpetual check. So basically this could be perpetual. Black played rook b1, exclam. Queen e4. So Adams is white, and I don't know how to pronounce this, so I'll just spell it Zhukova is black. Rook d1. Queen takes e6, check. King d8. Queen f6. King c8. Queen takes a6, check. King b8. Queen b5, check. King a7. Queen a4, check. King b8. Queen b5. And king a1. And so on. Let's go back to Fischer one more time. After move 44 during the Olympic tournament of 1970, his opponent, a friend, said, "I don't know who's better." Bobby put, "I don't know who's better, Bobby." But I offered a draw. Fischer was candid when he refused. I don't know who is better either, but I have an extra pawn, and only when both sides were reduced to past moves, 16 moves later, did he accept the draw. That's the spirit of a master. That's the spirit of a master. He was up a pawn. It didn't matter even if it was a drawn position. He wasn't going to give in. Okay, we're into chapter 5 now. It's called Sense. Sense. That's chapter 5. So it's the sense of a position is kind of what they're talking about in this one here. We're going to get this one set up, and then we're going to read the chapter beginning. white to play here. It's Topalov. And Gashmov is he's playing Gashmov. Okay, that's what it says about it. Many amateur. Oops, sorry, I had to do this here so that we have the board ready. There you go. Many amateurs believe that becoming a master is all about what you know. Masters know more technical chess information like extended openings analysis, extended endgames, and the like. That's an excuse, you can say. If only I had time to study and digest that massive of information, I'd be a master too. I'd know what masters know. But a master also has an edge over you because of what he senses. That's much harder to acquire. For example, a master has a better sense of danger. Giving a simulation of an example, he will quickly shuffle in one game as he moved on to the next board. Okay, sorry. What did I do this here? Sorry. Oh, this is a Simo. Sorry, I had that wrong. For example, master has a better sense of danger. Let's say it's a Simo expedition or an event. He will quickly shuffle from one game, and then he moves on to the next board. It's because of what he knows on or what he calculated. It's simply his sense that this was the right time to play and which move was the right move to play. Here's a similar case. This is Topalov as white and Gashmov as black. One second, let me put the lid back on. Okay. If an amateur is presented with this position, he might search for forcing mates and start by looking at for white queen b8. A master would certainly consider it, but once he saw that there's no quick win, he'd be more attentive to king g2. Exclaim. When White announced this game, he explained that it was a kind of useful move that a master plays automatically. How is it useful? It protects the h-pawn, the only potential target for black. It also eliminates the only tactical damage, such as the first rank problem after rook c1 and then queen. So this is the move that was played in the game. Most amateurs or beginning players would look at this, and this is a slight probably mistake. I'd give it a mistake mark because there's really no winning way. It allows rook c1 and then king and then basically c4, and you're kind of getting into a problem now, problematic. You could potentially try to push for check, maybe perpetual check, but you just got to be really careful. So this is an exclam mark. This stops any of black's ideas of coming to rook here. This move does. That's not going to happen now. Master's also a better sense when his opponent is running out of good moves. Here's Black's pieces are as well placed defensively as they are going to be. Therefore, King G2 may force him to weaken the defenses. That success because instead of super passive passivity, they passed like a passing move of some of these words are kind of like so you got to bear with me on that. So this would be like a more passive move here. And Topolov's opponent, he chose h6, which was actually a mistake in this line. This creates a fatal target, h6 does. Now that the king is safetied, queen b8 was played, queen f6, and then rook to h8. Now you get to see why h6 was a problem. See, if let's say that they played this move. We're just going to show a move. Let's say this move here. The queen came in. I'm going to say queen here, rook there, or not rook there. Sorry, right here, rook here. We're just going to say rook here. Then we'll say he just plays there, and then queen here, and then king up, something similar to this. But when they played h7 here, h6 here, this square was has actually, this pawn push has blocked actually the king from having a route in here. This pawn move, this now square is no longer there for the king to be able to flee to. So there's really only two spots that the king can flee. There's only one spot the king can flee to now, and it's f6. So that's why that was played, and then rook. Now the king's almost checkmated. He's like, it's one move from being checkmated. Queen g1, g8 is checkmate. That's why h6 was fatal. If the pawn were back on h7, queen g8 would not be mate because the king could go to h6. But that move was actually the move that lost for black. We call this a sense of danger, but we could also call it a feeling or an awareness. If you can't always be certain that playing a particular move is risky, but a master develops a feeling for which positions are too risky to be worth playing. You think such and such a move can't be played. It is too scary for a human. In this way, Garry Kasparov put it, a human can't defend such a position in a real game. There are other senses that give a master an edge, even against computers in an endgame. A machine has no way but calculation to determine whether it is close to imposing Zugzwang. A master can sense when he is getting close to it. But the most important master sense is of timing. A master not only has a better feeling for what to do in a position, but how urgently it must be done. This tells him what kind of calculated move he should be looking at. Sharp, tactical, are slow and strategic. It also tells him how much calculation he should be doing. Without that sense, a player might end up wasting time and energy looking too long at too many moves that are wrong for the position. Most of all, this sense tells him whose time favor, whose time is in favor. If you're an expert player, you will already have some sense of that. You know, for example, that urgency demands when you make a sacrifice. And urgency is demanded when you make a peace sacrifice. And we will go over that right now in another one here. Let's set up another one. This is another Vishy on as black. So okay. Okay. Make sure I have all this right. Okay. Anon's white and his opponent's black. White has better development, but black has an extra pawn. That alone suggests that time is on black's side. If he's allowed to coordinate his forces, let's say by queen c7, black can get this in queen c7, knight ec6, knight to c5, and then bishop d6, and then castle kingside. He's good. He will have a big edge, perhaps a decisive edge. With that in mind, that's why Anon was in great haste to play c4 exclaim. He's sacrificing. He understands that if black could get castled, black is actually winning. So he's going to try to break down black's ability to castle. And that's the whole idea based behind c4. And then d takes c4. Bishop e4 was right. White gave up a second pawn to create the threat of bishop takes b7 and energize his piece and makes it difficult for black to castle into safety. Black was able to stop bishop b4. Let me see here. c3. White gave up a second pawn. Okay, c3, but that was a stopgap measure, because after bishop e3, white has bounced to regain one of the pawns. It's bound to regain one of the pawns and also open up the c file for his rook. And with d4 to come, potentially rooks can actually come over and grab, go to e3 and then grab c3 with the rook attacking the queen. So there's always that. Play continued with queen c4, bishop d3, knight c5, rook e3. Thanks to c4, white has made almost all of the progress since the previous diagram. Understandably, black decides to get rid of one of white's bishops. Yeah. On e4, rook takes e4. Then play bishop d7 to meet the threat of bishop b6 with queen takes e4 and queen d8. So mate. Kind of an interesting continuation. It says that it doesn't take a master sense to realize that white needs to keep making threats to prevent black from consolidating his lead. That's why rook e3, knight e7, rook takes c3, queen d5, rook c5, exclam, queen e4, rook c7, so that if black were to castle, he would take the bishop. And attacking the d7 bishop and possibly exchange sacrifice, he would win outright. After, okay, what the player did was play this here. If he had played, the player had played bishop c6, he could have actually taken check, king takes, c5 check, and if the king went back, you have queen d6 and queen to e7 mate. And if rook d8, then c5 could be played, bishop c5, exclam, and that still eliminates the ability to castle, because then the rook will fall, then the bishop will fall, then the whole entire kingdom will start falling apart. If knight d5, rook takes b takes c, bishop c6, and then rook b8. Exclaiming. Now that Anon is basically equal, then the master will come out ahead in this because of their sense of urgency, as we were talking about. Bishop c5 again. Black can still defend with queen d5. Knight d5 was actually played by black. That was a mistake. The best continuation for holding would have actually been queen d5, and then Vishy most likely wouldn't have traded queens because he's down a pawn. It's outside, and that's a monster of a pawn. So he wants to keep the queens on the board and see if he can infiltrate in via queen a5, and then potentially maybe some sort of sacrifices to boot. This is this move here. They said this, but as often happened in difficulty is met with the constant threats. Prolong. Remember that one thing that we talked about. Prolong the idea. Even if you have to, the Soviet School of Chess talked about, even if you have to retreat temporarily to keep the pressure and prolong, because eventually what will happen is your opponent, if they get put in enough problems, will end up breaking under the pressure and you'll win. So that's kind of what they were talking about there, the prolong. I'll read exactly what this is. I'll read what prolong, because he said that in the book. Masters want more, and because of that, they often get it. It sounds too simple, but it is true. I'm reading what prolong is because I want you to understand why he said prolong. There are specific ways to enable masters, emulate masters in this way. Ultimately, it comes down to what Fischer says: keep the pressure on your opponent long enough. If you keep forcing him to make choices, if you keep trying to win, there's a good chance that you will. So that's what Anon did. Anon just kept pushing, prolonging and attacking, and eventually his opponent made a mistake with knight d5 instead of queen d5. And Anon sensed on that move, and he pounced on it. One sec. Well, I'll show you how he did it. So even if I figure if Bobby Fischer kind of said to keep the pressure, maybe we should listen. What you think? Which costs the queen? This costs the queen. If let me see here. Rook takes d6, king takes d6, and then rook b3, and now the queen is toast. So this takes right here, this sacrifice, got an exclam after king takes, then rook there, and the queen is gone. If queen f5, then g4, and the queen's trapped because the rook guards the pawn. The knight's pinned to the king, and so it's over. This is the simplest kind of timing to appreciate. Time was black's ally. And if white hadn't offered a second pawn back on c4, he would have lost in a rough fashion. He likely would have lost if he had played a quiet move at any point subsequent in any subsequent of the turns. This is Morphy chess, but you need to know more than Morphy to become a master. As he says, this is Morphy chess, but you need to know more than Morphy to make master. That's kind of funny. This is called counterplay, and let's pull up a board and get there, and then we'll read the next section in sense. Let's get this all put in right. Okay, dokie. And it's white to move this. It's already been castles, but it's fine. We'll do a study. Get these put in, then we'll read the next section inside of it. It's called right here. It's called counter. This is the next section inside the chapter called counterplay, where a master's superior sense of timing stands out is when material is equal. When the appearance of other factors, particularly counterplay, tells him whether time is a factor and who is favored. White to play. White has a choice of a promising plans, but king attack stands out. Kingside attack stands out. He controls more space there. Are potential targets. He controls more space there, and are potential targets on g7, h7, and h6. So these then that's one. And plan A, because there's actually three plans. He wants to maneuver his knight from e1, c2, e3 to f5. So this is the idea that he wants to do here, 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 and then into f5. This, and this. And then try to play queen to g and then attack the pawn. That's kind of the idea. but that's a secondary. That's part of the idea, is to get the knight from there, there. B, or he could play h3, follow up with knight to h2, and then play queen h5 and g4, and see if they can't go for some sort of attack via that way. And then there's a C plan. See, he could line up his light squared bishop and queen to also threaten mate 2 on h7. There are other options as well, but instead of trying to calculate them, white needs to get a sense of the time frame. How long white can take for the attack will depend on how quickly black generates counterplay. Black doesn't have any immediate threats, and he is several moves away from making c3 going after c3 a target, basically the pawn. But he is ready to play bishop a6, exclaim, to trade bishops and neutralize white's best piece, the light square bishop. And true white would still stand well. He played on the queen side. Let me see. What did they actually play? White played bishop b1 exclam here. This is actually a really strong continuation. That's really strong. If a4 were played, then bishop a6, a5, bishop takes, queen takes, or if bishop takes there, knight takes, and then a5, with a slight edge for white. But a master wants more. Remember what we talked about? They want more. White concluded he can basically get a chance, get more, but he doesn't have to do it slow and build up. With h3, he doesn't have to do this move here. No. Doesn't have to do that, or he doesn't have to play there. He can do it right away with a really strong, or back here. He can do it with a really strong move. Bishop b1. Black sets up a trap, and white went right into it. Queen c2. g6 was played by black. This is based on meeting h6 with bishop takes f1 and then takes. So rook e1 exclam was played here. Just get it out of the way. Your threat's still there. There's a lot of threats that could be played. And what did black play here? King g7 was met there. What they're talking about here is if this is a slight mistake, this is a mistake here, because this, and then bishop takes g2 is actually a exclam move here. And then if you try continuing, you could get the pieces out via there, and then you're in deep waters now. There's no way to stop the mating threat now. So that's why he played there. And then black is reduced to responding to specific threats and played king to g7, queen d2. Now that target is under fire. Rook h8. He's in reactive chess. Thanks to the inducing another king weakness, g6, white could just apply forcing or semi-forcing moves until black's position basically dissolves. Like what happened was e6 exclam here. f5 and then g4, and this is just crushing. I know I don't usually use that word, but I mean it is. If you're thinking that taking here would actually be a beneficial idea, I don't think so, because now there's a renewed threat of queen c, and if the queen comes here, then the knight could actually come in to e. And I don't know if the move I played was actually fast enough. Trying to figure out if it is fast enough. Not sure, but all I know is that G. I'd have to look at it a little more, but we're just gonna go over this. G4. Now that if what was actually played was knight c6. If takes, c2 is an exclam, and I think black's lost. Queen e8. Okay, so I was right. Knight e5. Followed by knight f7. So this is strong enough. Okay, good. And just be a little bit further down the road. Okay, knight c6. There followed g takes f5. G takes f5. Queen f4. With the idea of trying to get the knight in. Knight, maybe a knight there. Okay, queen f8. Queen g3 check. King h7. King h1. Exclam, with the idea of bringing the rook to h1 and then mate on g6. The game ended with queen f3, 6, king h4, king h4, bishop d6, attacking the queen, queen h3, knight takes, knight e7, knight takes f5, king g8, and then knight takes d6. And white and black resigned here because they have a passed pawn, and it's almost game, set, match here. There's also a potential threat of checking with the rook, and not looking too well. Let's see, what do we got here for time? Let's see. Yeah, we'll do one more, and then I gotta log off. All right. Let's do it to it. Oops, I gotta get this taken care of. Okay, white to play. Okay. Oops, I have to go back up. All right. On the other hand, there's times when there is no urgency at all. A master knows when he can attack and take his time doing it. Okay, white to move here. Unlike the last example, black is developed and has targets on c2. And rook d2 would actually be a mistake. So what white played here was c3, which is actually a good move. The interesting thing, rook d2 is actually a blunder. This loses to queen g5. Queen g5, and it's over. White's only advantage in space. White only advantage in space and has a better bishop. But black's bishop is doing more in this line here. That's why c3 was played. So he could keep the queen side relatively closed. Rook c5 to c7. H4, pawn h4, a5, king b1, but then came a mistake by black, a4, and this was a mistake because it allowed white to play the incredible a3 and lock the position down. It may not be immediately obvious, but white suddenly has a big advantage. Why? Because black has no way to open the queen side short of an unsound sacrifice on c3. That means that white has virtually unlimited time to carry out his own attack. He doesn't really have to calculate when choosing a candidate move he wants. In most cases, he have to make when choosing a candidate move he wants. In most cases, you have to look more than a move or two in the future. And so in most cases, like if there was still counterplay for black, white would have to calculate. Here white doesn't have to because he neutralized all of his opponent's threats. He followed a simple general plan of safely advancing the G and H pawn. Black tried to batter down the hatches with after queen f8, no, bishop f8, not queen, g4, king h8, f6. Black's pawn move changes the king side options. It prevents f5 to f6 and makes g takes f possible. But it does not change the timing. White can try one plan, and if it doesn't work, switch to another. He can just move around without damaging his winning chances. He looked at doubling or tripling on the G file. So rook hg1. Oops, hold on, let me see here. That's my problem. Drat. g5 here. And then this changes the whole scenario. Okay, now they look to double gh1, bishop e7, g3. White's got plenty of time. Rook f8, full defense mode. dg1, queen b8. Black's in full defense at this moment, but it's apparent that g3 followed by g takes f, bishop takes will acquire nothing. Black will have ample protection on g7. So queen d2, bishop d8, king a1, queen a7, bishop e6, queen b6, rook d1, exclam. See, when you spot a weakness, you can go after that weakness. White is looking for a favorable opportunity to play g takes f6. He's waiting and waiting and waiting. Bishop e7, rook d3, queen e6, queen e6, c6, queen d3, d2, and then queen b6. This is the mistake. This is the time that black has waited for. It's kind of like in Searching for Bobby Fischer, when they're moving back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, and then in the show, he says that was a mistake, and then he says, Josh, it's 12 moves out. Don't move till you see it. It's kind of one of those positions. This looks like that move's not a problem, but a couple moves out, the move becomes an apparent problem, and we'll get to see what happens. Wham, queen h5. Now you get to see the problem with the move. This is an exclam. See the idea, the reason this move now works is because the queen now is over here. The queen's right here right now. If white had kept, if black had kept the queen here, black could have played there when meeting h5 with queen to e8. But because of queen b6, h5, the queen can't meet queen h5 with queen e8. And now, I hate to say this, black's almost lost here. Surprisingly, you'd be like, what? Black's almost lost here? Yeah, when this queen got in there, now the break is going to start happening, the breakdown of the position, and you're going to see how it flows. He can end the game with bishop f7, and then basically play bishop here and in there, and there's really no way to stop that. And that's why that move C going to b6 was a mistake. The idea had been in the air for some time, but only works now when black can't defend on e8. See, we just said that. We're starting to get the sense. Do you see how that's working? You start to get that feeling when you feel that there's something over the board and you know it's the right move. Look at it and go with it. Make sure though you're not just just feeling happy about your position. Make sure it's a good one. You'll start to get a sense. The finish was cute. That's what he said. Queen b8, bishop f7, exclam. G takes. Queen g6, exclam again. h6, h takes, bishop takes, and then queen takes, g5, exclam. That was just pure beautiful. It was just beauty. Idea of h takes g would be met by bishop takes g. Well, yeah, so that's why I replied. Yeah, it's right here. H check. King g8, and then rook h d8, and there's no way to stop the mate here. This was beautiful, a beautifully played strategic game. And if you go back, what was the losing move? Where was that? A4. A4 was the losing move here. So the difficulty between these two games is striking In the first, black's few developing moves were not active, but there's things he could do, like bishop. Um, in our first game, sorry, the one we did last time, the bishop could have went to a6. The game prior that we did, bishop a6. White had to commit to an attack, remember, with bishop b1 and then the queen sliding over to c2. It would have worked. It looked like it could have been a skewer of the queen to the rook, but in reality, there was enough weaknesses in the position that we could threaten mate on h7. Or look for more moderate plans. In the second example, in the second example, black forces were well coordinated, but he had no targets after c3. I mean a3. White could take his time. So white could take his time. A good sense of time is in the intuitive. So a good sense of time is intuitive, but it's more difficult kind of intuitiveness to acquire than, for example, realizing when a standard combination is available because you recognized a pattern. Critical moments don't fit a pattern. Nevertheless, there are timing training methods. One that works particularly well with computers is to examine early middle game positions from a database. You could go to one of the online databases such as chessgames.com and look up at the games from recent international tournaments. Then one game by one, click on each position after, let's say, the 5th or 20th move. Your aim is to see if you can evaluate urgency. Does time matter to one player more than the other? That is, will one side's position naturally improve over the next several moves if nothing dramatically happens? Does one side have to use the initiative, use its initiative, lead in development, whatever? Once you've made an evaluation, see what happens and whether one side or the other acts out of the urgency. This will help deepen your sense of when you have to act. Interesting. That's really helpful. So if you are wanting to get your sense, your kind of chess sense to be more intuitive, like pick a couple games like what Andrew Soltis says from a database, recent ones, old ones. It depends on what era you like to look at, and from a tournament, and then get to like move 15 or 20 and get a feel for both sides and say, black has to do this, otherwise black's going to be in trouble, or white has to do this, otherwise white's going to lose the initiative. Black's going to have to do this, or white doesn't really have to do anything because after a3, right here, after pawn a3, there's no urgency. White can build up, or black can build up, and then implement their attack. That's kind of what Andrew Soltis is saying. Okay, so with that, I'm going to say adieu, and we're going to do a quick evaluation of what we just. Okay, hold on, let me get to that point. Okay, my turn. This is what, remember the psychologists have found that the fear of losing is extremely important, and it's for amateurs, when they survive as black, they're like, yes, I survived another round. But as a grandmaster or master, they look at it and say yes when they get to play as white next. Now it's my turn to play. That's what we learned from my turn. Let's see what we learned from sense. Masters also have an intuitive sense of when the urgency is in play, when they have to make something happen, when they have to make when a sacrifice is played. They don't wait around. They have that sense of when it's time to start pushing. And that's kind of what I got from the sense in chapter 5. In counterplay, masters have a sense of urgency when they can feel like their opponent. See, I'll read the counterplay because this is very vital. This is a vital point. Then I'll let you go. Whether a master, like a master sense of timing stands out, where a master sense of timing stands out is when material is equal. Then the approach of factors come in. The approach of counterplay tells him whether time is a factor and who is favored. So basically, that's what we have gone over. And our next one's going to be prophylactic equals time saving. Time saved. The time saved. So what we have to, and I'll wrap up all that. Take your turn. What it means is you have to know when. Like if you're afraid of losing, you know what? A lot of players are, but if you hold a draw and you're, then it's your turn as white. 2 thumbs up. Also, that's why Bobby Fischer says prolong. If you are up a pawn, don't just go for a draw. See if you can't push, and your opponent might make a mistake, and then you can emphasize it and win. Okay, and let me see. And oh yeah, counterplay is a vital thing that we need to go over. And sense is important too for a grandmaster and us to learn. But in the end, all that aside and good and all that, we have to remember that there's one thing: to receive the Lord Jesus, Lord and Savior of your life, is as vital as all those. And the sense of urgency is today, my friends. So I pray that you receive him as Lord and Savior. And so what we have to remember always in what Bruce Lee said is to take what you know and be able to apply it. Be willing to do something with it, and always keep pushing forward. Remember, treasure your victories. Learn from your losses. And remember that mistakes do not define you. It's how you handle the mistake that defines you as a chess player and a person in any field the Lord's called you into, my friends. That's why the Chess Cruncher motto is in place. We hang up our coats, we hang up our hats, we sit down and study when most won't. Team Chess Cruncher does, and that makes all the difference. And as Wesley so says, serve the Lord Jesus. As I say, God bless, and I'll see you next time on Chess Cruncher TV. Have a blessed morning, afternoon, and evening. The Lord willing, I'll be back on tomorrow, and we'll keep pushing forward. Remember what Hannibal Smith said. Even inside of a random position, there's always a plan. And when you find it, and you sense that urgency, and you stop that counterplay, and it's your turn, you get to say, I love it when a plan comes together, when that all happens. 2 thumbs up, hoorah, be blessed. Go Team Chess Cruncher. I'll see you tomorrow. Keep up your chess studying and having fun. Hoorah.